Hello and welcome to the Runner's World podcast with me, Rick Pearson. Today we're asking, are super shoes an injury hazard? And to help answer that question, I'm delighted to be joined by Liam McManus, Sophie Raworth and Rachel Boswell. So thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Great to be here.
Sophie, let's start with you. What's been your experience of running in carbon-plated shoes and how did you maybe come up with the idea that it might be contributing to an injury?
So I didn't run in carbon-plated shoes until 2019. I went and did the Valencia Marathon 2019 and I ran in these. These are my prized first pair. And I ran these. I got a PB. 3 hours,
Great.
27, 1 second. 6 weeks later, I did a half marathon. I did that. I got a PB, 1 hour 34, and I got an England Masters shirt from it. I loved running in them. They made me feel fast and springy and light, and they worked. I only raced in super shoes for marathons after that until 2023. I thought, right, I'm going to give it one last shot. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to beat my PB. So I was going to do 3:25-ish at the London Marathon in 2024. And so I worked really hard. I trained really hard and I increasingly used super shoes. Just because I was doing my speed sessions in them, they weren't the kind of, the really high-end ones, but they had a carbon plated.
Yeah.
And I wore them and I felt faster. I was faster. They felt great to run in and it was fine. I was all right. And then about 5 months before, I did a couple of races in the sort of my proper ones. And my ankles started getting a bit sore, but it would loosen up. And I kept wearing them. And I ran the 2024 London Marathon in a pair of super shoes. And I would have done my PB, I think. I got a 20-mile PB.
Okay.
But at 20 or 18 miles, my ankle just went. And it turned out, we thought it was bone edema.
Okay.
Then turned out it was actually a really rare stress fracture, the sort that snowboarders get. It's called the lateral process of the talus. And it was a bone in my ankle. I spent 6 weeks on crutches, in a boot, on a knee scooter. I couldn't run. I was off running for 6 months. It's only really recently that I've actually worked out, and I have no proof of this, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's anecdotal, but I have run for 15 years with no problems at all. And it does coincide exactly with the period in which I used super shoes a lot. And I'm pretty sure that's probably what at least helped a lot towards my stress fracture. It was such a strange one to get. I'm back in normal shoes now. I have no orthotics, no carbon, no nothing. And I'm running a year later, totally pain-free.
There you go. So Liam, as a podiatrist, are you surprised to hear some of that stuff? And what's been your experience of kind of super shoes coming in, the kind of injuries that you'd be seeing in your clinic?
I'm not surprised, but there's many different reasons why people develop stress injuries or overuse injuries, even from nutrition, health, well-being, sleep, women more than men. So there's lots of other reasons than just kind of pinning, I suppose, on super shoes. But we do see some biomechanical kind of shifts and patterns when you transition from a more traditional shoe or a minimalist shoe to a super shoe. Absolutely.
Can you give us a sense of what super shoes actually do? Because if someone's listening or watching this and is like, doesn't quite understand the kind of mechanics that happen in a super shoe.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just pick this one up as a bit of an example. So the really 3 characteristics of a super shoe. The first one really is the carbon plate at the front. The second one is the form and the geometry of the form as well. And the third is the heel stack at the back. So if you think of the carbon plate as like a spring, like a springboard, you think of the form and the geometry of the form as like a rolling pin and just gliding across the tarmac. And then think of the geometry as well, and then the heel stack as well, which is, and they're very different densities of form which make up the characteristics of a super shoe.
Yeah.
The important part, though, as well, is that not all super shoes are exactly the same.
Okay.
So different geometry, there's different springs. But if you think of a trampoline being the form, the carbon plate as a spring forward at propulsion, that's pretty much what a super shoe is.
So quite different actually to like a kind of traditional shoe, because you're going back to kind of traditional shoes. Right?
Well, I mean, what I'm really struck with, and it was Liam who showed me this, but if you look, this is a super shoe and you can see, I mean, you can literally see the carbon plate there, can't you? So this is a super shoe, and I only did this very recently. I sort of went, and try and bend that. I'm pushing very hard there.
Yeah.
Try and bend that thing. So if you think your foot is not moving in that shoe, either way. That is a normal shoe. This is a traditional running shoe. Oomph.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I can twist that. So my foot inside that shoe compared to that shoe In this shoe, it's not moving.
Mm.
In that shoe, it's moving, and all my muscles are moving as they are used to moving. There is the rigidity, I think I'm right in saying, pushes you forward and helps you go faster, and it does work.
Yeah.
It worked for me, and I loved running them. I really want to make that clear. I'm not saying don't use them.
Yeah.
But what I'm really aware of, I do think people don't understand what it is doing to your biomechanics, what it is doing to your foot, and the potential for injury.
Yeah, I think the rigidity, but also the form and the actual architecture of the shoe itself. You see the geometry of it here. And actually, if we look at this one, how kind of acute that is as well. And that changes from shoe to shoe as well. So it does, or it can, for a vast majority of people, shift your biomechanical pattern. So I'll give you a prime example. So a patient came in to see me with a more traditional running shoe, similar to this.
Yeah.
And we put him on the 3D gait analysis software, looking at objective gait analysis. And then we test him with this, test him with a super shoe, and all of a sudden he's gone from a heel striker to a more midfoot to forefoot strike.
Okay.
So if you're not able to, or don't recognize that, or you're not able to kind of tolerate that in terms of your bones, joints, tendons, muscles, in particular your ankles, knees, then potentially you may get injured. Or actually, should we think about this in terms of injury prevention? Should we be really working on proprioception, strength, balance a little bit more? So that we can actually tolerate these shoes.
Yeah.
But the way, I mean, the people who I asked people about this on Instagram a few weeks ago, and it was really interesting. The number of people who came back and they said to me, and again, there's no research on this, or very little research.
Very little.
I mean, I know you've looked into it. There's not much out there, is there?
I did about an hour's research with you and sent you loads of information, and did another couple of days of research about this, because we can't really keep up with the trends and this change of shoes as much as kind of we need to push research out as well. So it's super important that we do the research and literature, but we have to understand this a bit more. But yeah, in terms of navicular and tibia and talar stress fractures or stress injuries.
And those are bones in the ankles. So that's what people were saying to me. The injuries they've been having are navicular, which is I had the talus bone, which is here in your ankle, but it was the one next to it, the one I have. So they were saying navicular stress fractures, or people were getting plantar fasciitis or Achilles problems, and some were getting pelvic problems. Who knows whether they were to do with the super shoes, but lots of people were saying, I ran in normal shoes, I switched to those shoes, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
If we just think about that biomechanical change in load from a heel striker, potentially, to a more midfoot or forefoot striker, that's going to have some positives and negatives, right? It's going to have some real benefits. And in the literature, it reported running economy up to 4.4%, potentially. Real good benefit from it, right? But actually, if you've got a patient who is hypermobile, it might actually, in frontal plane movement, it might have an increase in pronatory movement.
Okay.
So that's the ankle moving inwards during initial contact, and then going from initial contact to more mid stance. And actually, if you do have hypermobility and your bones and joints are not able to kind of tolerate that degree of load for lots of different reasons, then potentially, you could end up having some injuries.
Yeah.
So it's about awareness.
I'm aware there's lots of good sort of good stories with super shoes. Rachel, you've run a super shoes.
I have. Quite a lot.
You ran your PB 248 in London in a pair of super shoes. So what's been your experience? Because you did actually have some foot issues pre-super shoes, right?
Yes. So, I mean, I like you, Sophie, I love running in super shoes. I've got my PBs. I got my first sub 3 in the original, Nike Vaporfly, and it's sort of got better since then. I've also run marathons and races in daily trainers because, this was 2019. Prior to that, super shoes didn't exist. Not everyone can dish out the cash. But I actually, during COVID, did have stress fractures in my foot. It was just my left foot. I had 3 stress fractures in one hit. So in the metatarsals, 1st, 3rd, and 5th. At the time, I'd done marathons previously and half marathons. I wasn't training for anything because it was COVID. There were no races.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said, Liam, it was a very emotionally taxing period of my life for various reasons. So wasn't sleeping very well, probably wasn't looking after myself as much. Running was a bit of a coping mechanism. And then I get stress fractures and people think, have you upped your mileage, changed your shoes? I was like, no, I've been wearing the same daily trainers I've been wearing for years. I'm actually running less now. So that's been interesting. But I think because of that experience, it's made me more aware of my feet.
Okay.
And it's particularly my left foot, being told we've got natural imbalances. I was told that my big toe isn't taking so much of my load, that individual sort of stuff. So I have been using resistant bands to, strengthen my big toes and my feet. And I've sort of almost factored that in. So when I then did get my first pair of super shoes, actually shortly after starting running again,
Yeah.
I kind of was always a little bit scared, I think, of being injured before. No one wants to take time off because of that. And at the start of last year, I did have a bit of a flare up again, and I was worried. Went to the physio, could have developed into a stress reaction, but I think because of that knowledge and that education I had from the first experience, I sort of was able to sort of be aware of it. But I think also biomechanically, I am naturally a bit of a midfoot, forefoot striker, so I sometimes wonder whether because of the way that I run, I might individually actually
Be well suited.
be okay with super shoes. So it's an interesting discussion, but I wouldn't wear them every day. Not a chance.
And I did. I definitely had an inherent instability in my ankle,
Okay.
that foot
Yeah.
that I injured before, because I twisted it skiing like 5-6 years ago. So it was definitely weaker. The tendons in it were weaker. And my tendons, I think, were getting a bit sore. We ran a race together shortly before my ankle completely went. And I remember saying to you, it was the London landmarks.
Yeah.
And I've got to warm up because my ankle's a bit stiff.
Yeah.
And I definitely had a sort of weaker tendon. And you said to me afterwards, if your tendon goes, what happens next?
What's the next thing? Well, it's the bones and joints, isn't it, under there? And actually your perineal tendon was getting overused. And then the next thing on the lateral ankle is potentially your talus, and you ended up with this kind of lateral talus stress fracture. Yeah, but in terms of instability, within the literature, there's low-level literature about the fact that super shoes can cause, for a lot of people, instability within the ankle. So actually, if you have an unstable ankle when you run in these, then you're going to then kind of compensate, aren't you, by asking the tendon, asking the muscles to work a little bit harder. We know that the super shoes help to reduce eccentric loading, specifically the calf muscle and quads. But actually, the longer you run in these, and the more unstable your ankle feels, and anecdotally, after I wear them as well, and a lot of people report this, that they do feel a bit unstable. You were saying yourself before. So we need to just be aware of this and incorporate S&C, strength conditioning and proprioception, earlier really in the training plan.
Yeah.
I was very struck with it when you said you can run again. I went to the physio, and the first thing she makes me do is she made me sit on the floor and try and move my toes, my big toe and my little toe. I thought, why is this about my toes?
Yeah.
And I never thought of it before. And she said, well, you've got to have a strong foot. And I couldn't move my little toe on my what was injured foot. And she was making me do the exercises you're clearly already doing.
Yeah.
And I've been told since the elites, the people you run in these shoes and do it all the time, they have strong feet. That's what they're doing. They're doing all the strength and conditioning. And I suppose my concern is that a lot of people are wearing the shoes that I just are doing what I did. They make you feel fast. They make you feel good. But nobody had said to me, just make sure your feet are strong and make sure you stay strong and don't overuse them.
Yeah, I don't think it's been reported much. I think most of the messaging I think I've heard about super shoes is that you could run more. You can run more. It actually saves your legs.
It does.
And the idea that I think there's a guy, is it Alexander Sorokin, who's a kind of great ultra runner who's trying to run 200 miles in a day. And he seemingly logs most of his miles in super shoes. And you can think, well, if he can do 150 miles in super shoes, surely I can get away with 3 times a week or whatever. But it's not as simple as that, Liam, is it? Is it about what you're doing when you're not wearing the shoe?
I think there's a lot to it.
Okay.
But it's all on an individual basis, really. We've got to think about what these super shoes are doing specifically to your injury, which is 3 stress fracture of the left foot. First metatarsal as well. It's quite unusual to get that as well. And actually you're doing intrinsic muscle exercises to kind of combat that. Well, the super shoes, low-level literature again, that if you don't move your foot inside the shoe, you're not really going to be using these intrinsic muscles, right? Actually, if you then start to train in this more than you should do, then potentially speaking, you're going to then weaken your intrinsic muscles, you're going to weaken your foot. And what does that then cause?
Yeah.
Can we do something to counteract that? Can we improve strength and conditioning? And perfect example, rubber bands with your big toe, scrunching your toes as well, just improving those 4 layers of muscles underneath your foot.
Because basically, in a super shoe, your foot does not move, does it? Really, nothing like it would move in a normal one.
When you say foot,
Let's use a different one too. It's not,
Yeah,
that one has always
right.
been picked up. Let's use that one. But I mean, that's another one or that one. Yeah. What happens?
it's not
what's
you're
your foot
moving
doing?
this way, is it? So it's not moving this way, and it's not moving from side to side from the midfoot. However, depending on where you land here with the geometry of the front of the rocker, your back of your foot is going to start moving quite excessively.
Oh, right. So that's why your ankle's getting really involved.
Yes. So your tibialis posterior tendon,
Yeah.
the tibialis anterior tendon, which is
Rub down either side of your legs.
yeah. So the tibialis posterior is the inside of your ankle. Tibialis anterior is the front of your ankle. Your extensor tendons, and again, there's been some case studies about extensor tendinopathies with these type of shoes as well. And then your perineal tendon, which is the one on the outside of your ankle, which is what you did.
That's what I did. Yeah.
You're gonna if you have a more of an unstable ankle because you can't cope with this level of range of movement, and your strength and conditioning is not to the level maybe that it could be, then you're going to get some overuse.
So it's throwing you onto the front, but the back is moving more.
The back is moving more, yeah. And if I get a bit of a finger test here, there's really no
There's no
stability around
support.
here.
There's no support there at all. No.
Now, if you then go from this type of shoe, which is a traditional running shoe that has a lot of support, can't really push it here,
Yeah.
you can then flex and move that foot.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden on marathon day comes 2026, I'm going to put my super shoes on. It completely changes, potentially, how you're running.
But that's what a lot of people do. And a lot of people came back and said to me, and I have to say I've done that as well. And I was fine on the other side. Although when I wore them, I did one marathon, I wore them, none of these shoes, but I wore a pair of Nikes and I came over the finish line. I did sub 3:30. I was great. It was during COVID actually. And, but I couldn't take another step. My calves were exhausted. I literally couldn't walk. But what a lot of people are doing is they say, right, save these really high performance shoes for race day only. Can you get away with that?
I think people are doing, and there's high responders to these shoes, and there's some low responders to these
As in
shoes.
people, high responders, people who do really well and people who don't.
Exactly. And you might be, Rachel, a low responder to this shoe. You might do really, really well in it, for example, but it's not actually because you are a mid to 4 foot striker at initial contact phase. Actually, it might just significantly improve you because you're used to that level of stress. And actually, you do 60 to 100 kilometers per week anyway, and you've got incredibly good times as well. So your S&C is on point. You've got a good physio. You've got good shoes and good form.
I see. This is where it's tricky as well, because I understand the logic of save your race day shoes for race day, because let's face it, race day shoes are more expensive. They're an investment. People don't want to put like useless miles in them and then wear them out for race day. But I'm also of the thinking, like, there's also the saying, nothing new on race day.
Exactly, but that's
So-
what we
so
say to everybody all the time.
it's
Nothing new.
Any shoe that I'm wearing on race day, I would have always run in before. Like, even if it's just for, 1 or 2 runs, because each shoe feels different. As you say, the geometry makes it different. And you've almost got to like learn the shoe from I guess I also think in a very kind of performance mindset of like, I put on a shoe and I'm like, how can I get the best out of this? And it's like, okay, right, well, with this one, I've, got to lean, or I've got to do this. So you've almost got to work out how to make it comfortable. And, we've discussed before, there are some super shoes, say, I also like using some super shoes for like my really fast efforts or marathon pace efforts, because I want to practice what that feels like and how to, if I'm wearing a super shoe and I'm like, ow, that hurts, then I know, no, that's not for race day because things are going to get worse. And it's kind of almost like that's almost as important for me anyway. But when you're, say, doing intervals in a pair of super shoes, you'll jog up and you think, oh, these feel awful. Like, I'm all over the place. I'm unstable. I can't even corner properly. It feels, as you say, it feels very unstable. You dial into the fast stuff and you're like, okay, that feels good. So when I wear super shoes in training, I need to know that I'm going to do something sort of fast.
Yeah, you're not jogging around.
conservative.
Yeah.
Like, I would, there was I sort of said to you another time, there was an example where I was doing a run and I was going to do some fast efforts, got to it and I thought no. So I spent the whole time just sort of like easy pacing around, and it just felt awful. And it's sort of like, if I'm practicing with them, I need to know that I'm going to use them in the right way and then tick that off. And as we know, you shouldn't be doing speed sessions every day in your training plan anyway, because that in itself can lead to injury and problems. So I'm like, well, if I'm doing 1, maybe 2 speed sessions a week, then I'll be using carbon plate shoes 1, maybe 2 sessions a week at most.
Yeah.
Because that's the way that my training plan is. So I kind of try and think of it in that sense.
Yeah, that's still sustainable. I mean, for you, would you wear them if you were like marathon PB?
Now,
Yeah.
I wouldn't wear them at the moment. I mean, I've done a couple of races. So I did a race at the weekend. I did a 10-mile race, and it was a road race.
Yeah.
And I was really struck actually I arrived there in my normal shoes, and I wasn't going for a fast time. I just wanted to get around it. In fact, it was my first road race since I stress fractured, since I did my ankle in 2024. But I was really struck. It was a proper Surrey Championships race. Everyone was, I mean, all up the front, they were all wearing super shoes.
Yeah.
It seemed to be. Everyone's in fast shoes, and they're all very, very fast runners. I think that there's a huge pressure if you're trying to, if you're trying to race and get a good time, there's a massive pressure to wear them.
Yeah.
And London Marathon, for example, I've every year since 2011, 2012, 13, I can't remember when, but I've been getting good frage places. So I have, got under the time needed to get a good frage place. There's a huge pressure to do that, and those times are coming down. It's harder to get the times now because, as Hugh Brasher himself says, they are making those times. You have to go faster because the super shoes, like world records, are bringing the climbs down.
Yeah,
of course they are. People are running faster in them. So there is a pressure, and if you stand on a start line and you think you might do quite well in a race. I'm at the point now in my life where I'm going, I might get first, second, or third in my age group. That's my goal. But if you're there and you think, well, it could, a couple of minutes. If you're doing a 10-mile race or a half marathon, it could take a couple of minutes off. So at the moment, I'm just not running in super shoes because I'm only just back to being able to run pain-free, no orthotics, nothing.
But you might reassess at some point.
I mean, this is the thing. Now I just think for the sake of a PB, I don't need to get another PB. I've done it. For the sake of a faster time, for the sake of 2 minutes faster, nobody really cares apart from me.
Yeah.
You don't know. I've just told you what my PB is. You would have had.
I knew.
Of course you have.
3:27.
And 1 second.
01.
That's really annoying.
But I know what you mean, because I'm trying to do the 5-minute mile, and it's gonna be, if I do it, it's gonna be really, really close. It'll be like 4:59, and I will definitely wear
Of course you
a
will.
super spike.
Yeah.
Because that difference. I did a bit of training today where I was just in a kind of normal racing flat, and then the super spike, and it psychological possibly, but I definitely felt like even over 200-meter reps, I was probably a good second quicker.
And
I'm
it's
trying to think, or even if there's a risk, I might just think that it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I think there might be quite a few runners out there who think, actually, there might be something in this, but actually, God, I just can't. I almost feel at a disadvantage if I don't use them now. That's the world we're in, I think.
But psychologically, you'll turn up at a start line now, and if you are trying to go for it, you turn up at a start line and you're not in super shoes, you will feel at a disadvantage psychologically to everybody else who you think, especially particularly if it's a marathon, you can. I mean, you just did a brilliant time. What did you get? 2:48 in the London Marathon. What's that? How many minutes PB?
2 minutes.
So that could have been, how much of that's super shoe? How much of that is your massive fitness and your amazing running ability? But you did it.
Yeah, and I suppose this is the thing really, because I remember in 2019, I was living in Australia at the time, and I was sort of doing some races. This was pre-stress fracture, and I was wearing my daily trainers for my races. And I was quite well, and I was really getting to race. And I remember looking at the races, like after a finish line, I'd look at the people who were like winning, and this was when you had like the first generation of super bright super shoes.
Okay,
it's like, what are they? Like, what are they on their feet? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, they're these special new expensive shoes. And then I suddenly thought, oh, maybe that's what you need. And then everyone starts to think that. And then there is this kind of, as you say, almost like a pressure. And because there are so many super shoes coming out, the brands are competing with one another. They're seen as the sexy shoes. Like when a brand releases a brand new stability shoe, no one's necessarily going absolutely wild for it.
Yeah.
But when you get a kind of big marketing campaign for this, glitzy fast shoe,
It works though.
Appealing. Exactly.
That's it. Yeah.
They do work. And people, myself included, love the hype. And there's a certain hype around it. And when you see the results and the performance, you do almost feel like left out if you haven't got that.
We haven't got them, yeah.
So it's an interesting one, but then I think it does need to come with that the education.
It needs to come with a bit of warning. Is that the right
Yeah.
word? Warning. I just wish I wish there'd been more information out there.
Yeah.
And I could have thought, hey, I've had a bit of an ankle injury. Maybe I should be a little bit careful when I'm using this.
I think I'd like the manufacturers to look at an educational leaflet rather than a warning specifically, because if you have a minimalist shoe, a traditional shoe, or a super shoe, each one of these characteristics of your shoes you'll probably have warnings for each if you have each one. So, for example, a minimalist shoe, you might have an increased incidence of metatarsal stress fractures versus this type of shoe, which is a super shoe.
Yeah.
And then you've got navicular stress fractures, talar stress fractures, periarticular tendons around the ankles. We've got the tibialis posterior, anterior, perineal. They all take a little.
These are just to be really clear, because I've had to really look at. You're talking about the bones in the ankle here, or top of where the leg bone meets the ankle. Those
So
are the ones that are wrist.
This one around here, and then your navicular is here. Your tibialis posterior
Are
tendon.
the ones at the tendons that run down the side of the foot one's on the inside, one's on the outside. So that's the area that is being affected.
Actually, for some people,
For some people, yeah.
but for others, they can tolerate this, and it's absolutely fine for them to tolerate it. But
Well, we've just been through marathon season.
Yeah.
Well, the spring one. Have you seen a rise in the number of people who are coming to you with issues and you're thinking, oh, maybe?
yes, but we've transitioned people away from these shoes sometimes, and also we've transitioned people to them because of the net benefits for that as well. So
Why would you transition them to them? What do you mean?
So if you're already a midfoot, forefoot runner, and you actually have a risk of stress fractures around the forefoot, you might actually want some stiffness around here in order to distribute that load a little bit more towards the ankle and the knee.
That's interesting, Liam.
That's really interesting, yeah.
I'm going to read out a few responses because there was an Instagram post put out. And it said, Instagram post you put out, Sophie said, wondering how much my super shoes had to do with my ankle injury. And you got loads of responses. From just a normal runner, I suffered a navicular stress injury after wearing some on a short run a few years ago. Then I heard on the Science of Sport podcast that there had been studies on athletes experiencing the same injuries. So that's that. And we've got a lot of physios, and we got Liam Buchanan said the ground reaction force is much larger with platelet shoes. So yes, more speed, but more forces also affecting the tissue stroke joint it is acting on. So it happens to both amateurs and pros who I've seen. And then Becky Duncan, another physio, said, having worked with amputees and neurological patients using carbon blades and splints for many years, the effects this material has on gait and biomechanics should not be underestimated. If you had previous ankle injuries or hip asymmetry, take advice before buying, which I think is actually very similar to what you're suggesting.
I absolutely agree. So when you have these for race day, like a lot of people do, you're training in such a different type of shoe, and then all of a sudden you put your super shoe on, and automatically, for the vast majority of people, your biomechanical profile then shifts and changes. So is your body, your knees, your muscles, are they able to cope with this level of change?
Yeah.
How do you know?
I would say we need to be more proactive rather than specifically going for race day. We need to just incorporate it like you do, really, and incorporate your proprioception, ankle strength, stability, intrinsic muscle strength, and then we incorporate them. If you train for 5 days a week, I would say 20% of that time potentially in super shoes. But when that 20% of the time, you're doing short interval work.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Towards when you come to marathon training and towards the back end, you might want to try them out a little bit longer because the fundamentals are there. When you buy new shoes, you might get blisters.
Yeah.
You might get toenail issues, which cause you to actually pull out a marathon. And that's so simple, isn't it? Just to try your trainer on first, use it, get used to it, like you say, Rachel. And then we can crack on.
Liam, Sophie, Rachel, thanks so much for your time coming on and talking about super shoes. I think it is a very kind of underreported area, so great to talk about some of the issues, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great to talk to you.
So that brings to the end of this week's Runners World podcast. Let us know what you think about super shoes, podcast@runnersworld.co.uk, and we'll see you next time.
If you haven't heard already, Runners World has got a club.
That's right, 30 years in the making, the Runners World Club is here to take your running even further.
And as our dedicated viewers, listeners and fans, let's say fans, we wanted to tell you more about it. So we've got a guest here to talk about it.
That's right, we're here with our friend and colleague Jen Bazon, Membership Director, to learn more. So Jen, tell us, what exactly is the Runners World Club?
So Runners World Club is our best ever brand experience and gives readers access to a multitude of benefits, experiences and rewards in addition to receiving the print magazine every month. And a membership to Runners World Club really does give you everything you could possibly need to get fitter, faster, and healthier.
You could do with a bit of that.
Me? Does sound good, actually, yeah.
Yeah. What do people get, Jen? What is included in a membership?
So we've got 3 different tiers of membership: bronze, silver, and gold. And our gold membership is our sort of top tier, all singing, all dancing membership. And with that, you get access to our brand new training plan library via our reimagined companion app. You get access to award-winning training platform Final Surge, which gives you the ability to sync Runners World plans with your training devices. So with your Garmin, Apple Watch, Sunto, Polar, whatever your kind of preference. And that means that you can follow training sessions in real time on your watch with guided prompts. So it saves you having to sort of memorise interval sessions and things like that, as it's all programmed into your watch. You also receive our monthly print magazine, our weekly Runners World Club newsletter, and you get full access to the reimagined companion app, where you can access discounts and deals from running and fitness brands, and you also get access to exclusive gold member only content. So it's jam-packed with benefits.
And there are these live events, aren't there? Spencer Matthews was seen on last weekend with Runners World, and Susie Chan. So tell us about those.
Yes, very exciting. So what we wanted to do with membership was give our members the chance to meet and get to know each other, as well as the Runners World team and celebrity guests as well. So yeah, we hosted our first event the day before the London Marathon with Spencer Matthews, Susie Chan at the Samsung store in King's Cross, and it was a lot of fun. We had 85 runners there, and we did a shakeout run and Q&A, and it was very exciting, and the feedback was brilliant. So we're already excitedly planning our next one.
Excellent.
Let's get into the guts of this. Training plans.
Yes.
It's going to be the main draw. Lots of people have probably used the Runners World training plan across their many years of running. What are the training plans looking like?
Yeah, so our training plans have been written by Tom Craggs, Robbie Britton and Georgia Wood, and we've produced this brand new library which you can get via the app, and they span from 5k to ultramarathon. And what's really brilliant is runners now have the ability to customise those plans according to their training preferences. So if you want to, say you've got a marathon coming up in 20 weeks' time and you're targeting 3 hours, 45 minutes, and you want to do 3 to 4 runs per week, you just put that into the filter and you'll be served a tailored plan. And in addition to that, every 4 weeks in those plans, there's the opportunity to kind of reflect on how your training's going and choose an alternative plan if it's not quite working out. So say that kind of 3:45 time goal was a little bit punchy, you can sort of change to 4 hours. So that self-reflection kind of ensures you sort of are following the plan that is actually right for you.
Right, I want in. How do I join?
So you can join by clicking the link in the episode description or searching Runners World Club and signing up via the Hearst Magazine's website. And it's priced at $9.99 for your first 3 months, which is an absolute bargain.
A steal.
That is an absolute deal.